Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2021. The name of the show is Babylon 5. This is season 3, episode 16, and the episode is called War Without End, Part 1. So full spoilers for this episode, as per usual. And this is a big one. This episode, has a lot of little things that are cool mythology wise and a lot of things that we're going to talk about, but it had like two huge like moments that made me go, well, I mean, I legitimately sent,
they're kind of like bookended too.
Yeah, I legitimately sent Tara messages with the words oh F-bomb twice. Once near the start of the episode and once near the end of the episode, as we were watching. So big stuff to talk about here. I mean, knew it was going to be big. We knew, people had said the big two-parter was going to be a huge deal. So here we are to discuss it and talk about all the mythology doors that this has opened up here. So, Commander Sinclair. We have to talk about him. We have to talk about Sinclair.
Yeah. This is going to be hard because we already have a hard time getting Sheridan and Sinclair's names.
I mean, actually,
right? Now we have to think about it.
But it may be easier now that they're both there, so we have to differentiate. I think the reason why it's easy to mix them up sometimes is because we just he replaced him, so the names just kind of blur together. So what I thought was so good about this, because this is before the opening titles, is we get this reveal. We go to Minbar, we get more of a glimpse of Minbar as well for the first time.
Lots of crystals.
Lots of crystals. We've heard about the crystals. And we have a hooded figure, and it's like, oh, they're teasing someone. Who could this be? Who could this be? And this Minbari guy comes up, and he's like, oh, hey, we had these instructions. It's very Back to the Future, end of part 2, where the letter, Doc Brown's left a letter at the post office. It's like, oh, you have to deliver it here on this date in 100 years. Well, it wasn't 100 because it was the 50s, but you know what I mean. Like, it was very that, right? And you see the envelope, and I think this is a genius way to reveal this, because it gives you this moment of seeing the name, and you get excited seeing the name Jeffrey Sinclair. You're like, oh my god, is it him under the hood? And then within like 3 seconds he lifts the hood and it's him. So you get this kind of rush of realization, and then the kind of the confirmation of it all in one little neat bow. So were you excited to see him?
Very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited to see him.
I was like, okay, all right, this is a big one.
I wasn't expecting it. I know you said that he comes back or something for an episode or two, but I guess I already thought we had that episode. Oh,
because there was like a small like video call in like season 2, yeah, when he explained the Rangers kind of briefly. Yeah.
Right. So I thought he was done then. After that,
honestly, I was still, I wasn't sure because I'd heard it came back for an episode to properly finish off the story, and I wasn't sure if that counted. I was like, was that really like is that like the big return that? So I wasn't sure, but because I wasn't sure, it made this like more exciting. When I was oh, he is back, and it is a bigger deal. He's here. He's going to interact with characters. He's going to talk to Sheridan. He's going to talk to the others.
What I do think is kind of interesting about this is that he is, I mean, Babylon Squared. He was still the commander and hadn't left the show. So, it seems like okay, this is going to be the storyline where they wrap up this part. But like he looked very different in the in that episode when you do see him again, because he's a lot older and stuff. And there's a line in here that they kind of plant that I think is there because, the storyline had to be wrapped up sooner than was expected.
Most probably, yeah. I mean, as far as him looking like not as old as he was when we saw it, I'm not so sure if like he's immediately going to be that in this in part 2 of this, or if it's going to be more this is just him starting on the path to eventually being that.
Yeah, it's just Ivanova drops a line saying like the last time a pilot did this they aged 20 years or something.
Which to be fair did happen. I remember that was the start of the episode, if you remember.
I don't. I couldn't remember if that was something we watched or it was just something thrown in for this episode.
It was there. It was because that was like that's why they went out and searched for what was in Sector 14. It was like why did this pilot age? That was like the setup for it. So, so even if the line is purposely there to remind you of that for that reason, it did happen. It wasn't like it was just pulled out GMS's ass. Yeah. Okay. So no. Super exciting stuff. And then on top of that, like, so the two things we get before the title sequence is we get Sinclair and the fact that Sinclair's going to be involved in this story, and then we go to Ivanova on the command deck getting a message from the future, which she hears herself, basically saying, "Oh, Babylon 5's under attack. We're all dying."
And Bridge Boy's there to confirm it.
Bridge Boy's there to confirm it.
I feel like we haven't seen them. I did notice that they have, because I thought Bridge Boy was wearing just like civvies, but it looks like everybody else is wearing the same thing. So, like, there's no insignias or anything on it that I could see. It just looked like a nice shirt, but everybody else was wearing something similar. So they do have something else that they're wearing. It's the first time like I actually paid attention to it.
So do you think it's a case of, well, Dilemma's going to make new uniforms for, like, you know, dozens or hundreds of crew potentially, so they get something that's more simple, that's easy to replicate. It's just a shirt.
They're all just Minbari pajamas.
Yes. As opposed to, you know, the main core command staff, which are all have their nice fancy jackets and whatnot.
Plus capes.
Yeah, so this is exciting as well. It's like, okay, so this is something that's coming from Sector 14, which we've had time travel shenanigans going on from before, and this is a message from the future. And, you know, we've had signs of Babylon 5 being destroyed, all the way back to Signs and Portents, right, with your main man, Garrett Graham, with the Minbari...
Quick reminder for everybody.
Yeah, just in case we forgot who Garrett Graham was.
Come on, ring light.
We could see him. So he... That's not he. So at the end of that episode, you know, the Centauri seer talked about how she saw Babylon 5, you know, blowing up and all the rest of it. We get more hints of that in this episode. And one of the questions we had actually back in Babylon Squared, which is the episode in season 1 that we're talking about, we keep referring back because this is very much a sequel in a lot of ways to that episode.
Yeah, this is really a part 2.
Well, no, it's a part 1.
Yeah, but shut up.
But so there's a lot of callbacks to that episode, and I've forgotten what I was going to say now because you interrupted me.
You said there's another question from that episode? We had questions after that episode?
Yes. So the flash forward, so Sinclair in that episode had a vision of, like, Garibaldi kind of, like,
sacrificing himself?
Yeah, sacrificing himself out to save the station. And they actually addressed that very distinctly in this episode, where he makes a choice about how to deal with Garibaldi to try and avoid Garibaldi being put in that position again, seemingly. Well, as best as I can tell, anyway, I do have, like, when we talk about what's actually going on in the plot, I do think there's maybe some flaws in Sinclair's plan here, but I'll talk about that in a minute.
I agree.
However, and this is the thing. This is actually because we questioned at the time. We said, "Oh, how much of this is kind of wonky because Sinclair had to leave, you know, because the actor had to leave." And I think the fact that they're actually bringing it into this, and we're talking about changing the future and making sure things happen the way they're supposed to, or changing things that are going to happen, we're kind of addressing it quite neatly. The only thing that kind of makes it wonky, at least so far to me in this episode, is that Garibaldi's hair has changed completely since they shot that flash forward. Like, so in this, like, because we see it again in this episode, and he's got
his hairline's a little bit, well,
it's not even just a hairline. He's got it much shorter. You know, he's trimmed it down, and, you know, present season 3 show, right? He's got like a really he's shaved it down, so it's just a really thin haircut. But in the flash forward, he's got the season 1 thicker, kind of taller hair, and it's like, oh, okay, all right. That's the one little thing that doesn't quite add up here. Is his hair.
I just assumed he started to shave it short because his hairline is a lot higher up. Oh, kitty cat.
I don't know if it's actually changed that much since season 1, really, but yeah, that's probably why. It's probably because it's been changing for years that he's finally made that call. But regardless, like, it's the one thing that kind of sticks out, because one of the things that I was thinking about during the episode is, like, when we saw anything from the future, what were they wearing? Because all the uniforms have changed. But what's neat about it is, during this scene, is they're not wearing the regular uniforms. They're wearing, like, the SWAT gear that they put on sometimes, and that presumably hasn't changed. So they actually kind of, and I don't know if this is because GMS knew that eventually that the uniforms were going to change, because he'd already, you know, had kind of that mapped out. So he was smart enough not to use them in any of that future stuff. But or if that was just lucky. But I was like, oh, okay, that's neat. That's neat. That doesn't conflict with anything.
Yeah. I mean, like, if this was supposed to originally be the end of the story for Sinclair and for Garibaldi, then this could have been like the final episode of Babylon 5. So Garibaldi could have sacrificed himself, and that would have been the end of the show, and the end of his character.
But what do you mean? Why would this be the end of the story?
Well, I mean, okay, honestly, I looked at the trivia, and somebody said in there that this was originally JMS's plan to bring this storyline into the very end of Sinclair's story. So this would be like the last episode of the series, if Sinclair was still commander of Babylon 5, but he left.
So, yeah, but what does that mean for the rest of the show that was also planned? That still has to happen.
Well, I mean, that would have happened beforehand, I guess, but before this episode.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because it made no sense to me. You've thrown that out there.
Right, so this Babylon 4 and Babylon 5 tie-up would have been like the end of the series episode.
Well, that's pretty interesting. It's kind of weird to think that the show might have been in a kind of different order, or the big events that were to come might have been in a completely different order, depending if we still had the same main character. It does mean that in the reboot there's a lot of like stuff to play around with. Like, I mean, if the things as we get them are in a vastly different order to what was originally planned, then maybe he'll want to like put it back to sort of an original order. But then again, we know that it's actually going straight to Sheridan in the new show. So I mean, there's a lot of weird like. Basically,
I'm sure the show will be very different.
I think what we're learning here is that he's very good at being fluid with what this, because it doesn't feel like, sure, there's the odd little thing that feels like they had to patch something up, or an actor left, so they had to just wrap up the story there. This doesn't feel like it's supposed to be the end and that we're betraying anything by continuing. It feels like we're doing a big chapter of the story. It feels like we're doing something monumental that's important to the overall story, but it doesn't feel like we're like, you know, because some shows like have an ending and then they sort of continue because they're successful. It's like, oh, we want more seasons, so they keep going. This doesn't feel like that with this two-parter. I don't feel like we're going to be like, oh, now Sinclair's story's done. What are we doing with Sheridan and everyone else? This is just continuing for no reason. It doesn't feel like that at all. So, credit, I guess. That's what I'm saying. Is that I'm getting? All right.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it doesn't. It feels like an epic two-parter. It even feels kind of like a season finale. I could see how if Sinclair stayed on the show, then it, you know, the whole tying it into the Babylon Squared episode would work as like a finale. Like his big send-off is now he has to go back and save the Minbari from the shadows in the past.
Well, yeah, conceptually, there's a lot of big stuff in this episode. We are dealing with time travel again. We are dealing with seeds that were planted in season 1 and have been kind of, you know, watered every so often here or there, but are properly kind of sprouting now in this episode. And I'm referring to the big other, like, OF bomb moment towards the end of the episode, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Because the premise of this is that Sinclair does come to the station and he kind of gets to meet Zach, and they kind of acknowledge that he was there a little bit. There was a little overlap in season 1 when he was technically there, but they never really interacted much, so they have kind of a nice little meeting. Garibaldi conveniently has already left to go and investigate Sector 14, so he's not around for. And I was like, oh, that's cool, because it means that they're going to have some sort of emotional, like, when they see each other later. Although they might not now. Given where the rest of the episode goes, they might not see each other. But that's what I was thinking when he conveniently left right before Sinclair
I have theories,
arrived.
But yeah, I suspect that they will meet.
Okay. Yes. I mean, we've got a whole episode for Garibaldi to go and do something stupid to try and see him, because he might want to.
Well, that's the thing. Like, he was able to get that password real fast.
Explain.
Okay, so, well, we're not there yet, but like, sure, the Sinclair has left a message for Garibaldi because he's not going to be able to see him, and he's basically planned it this way to leave without him so that his destiny of sacrificing himself on Babylon 4 is not a thing that happens. So because of that, he leaves him a voicemail, well, a video mail, Crystal thing, where he just has to like guess the password. I don't know why it's password protected to begin with, maybe to delay him, but then he's able to figure it out within a few guesses. So
yeah, I figured it was to delay him so that he wouldn't maybe get to open it into, because maybe he's going to tell like Sheridan the password like before he goes back, or you know, maybe he tells Linear, hey Linear, tell Garibaldi the password for that message is this.
Yeah.
Or something.
Okay.
I don't know.
That would be all right.
So here's the confusing part for me that I think Sinclair's maybe not thought of here is, you said so he doesn't sacrifice himself in Babylon 4, but I'm pretty sure that Flash to the Future wasn't Babylon 4. I'm pretty sure that was meant to be Babylon 5.
Yeah, it might have been. I wasn't sure.
Which is why I have a slight nitpick with his logic, because that means that Garibaldi is on Babylon 5, which is where his sacrifice is supposed to happen. Now, admittedly, the rest of the episode does make it clear that if our main team in this episode succeeds, then the disaster that's going to destroy Babylon 5 and the fight that's going to destroy Babylon 5 will not have to happen, potentially. So, in that sense, it'll still save him, but it felt like, well, surely keeping him away from Babylon 5 might actually be the better thing. Unless, admittedly, though, we don't know how much more prophecy or future knowledge that Sinclair's got right now. Maybe he like knows.
We didn't get to read the letter.
Yeah, both, because Sinclair gets a letter from the that's like 1,000 years old. So does Delenn, and they both get to open it now, and that's why they're going on this mission, because they've clearly both been given instructions that this is what needs to happen. And what I like about a lot of this, so Delenn goes to Sheridan and says, "Hey, trust me. We need to go to the White Star. We need to go out to Sector 14, and I'll explain when we're on the ship." And they bring Ivanova, Cole, and Linear's there too. And we get like a little history
I have a new
lesson.
nickname for Cole.
What?
Morbius.
Why?
Because the trailer for Morbius came out, and I don't know, I see Morbius when I look at him now.
Sure, okay. But we get this kind of like, okay, here's a bit of a history lesson, here's a big mythology dump, and all of it is super interesting for a variety of reasons. So we find out with some footage, so there's like one bit of footage from the original war, right, from 1,000 years ago. It's like one of the only pieces of footage that exists from that time, and it shows a Minbari station going down, and that the war was probably going to be lost because of this, but the thing that showed up that helped save them was Babylon 4. And it was like, okay, we knew that was traveling through time, we kind of assumed the future, but it goes back in time and helps win this fight, which immediately I love this, because all of a sudden the reason why the Minbari want to fund Babylon stations makes a whole lot of sense. Because in their history, it's always been a case of a Babylon station went back in time and saved their entire race in this war.
But I think only the Grey Council knows it, is what she said.
Yes, but that's the higher ups though, right? That's the people making decisions, so that's okay. Doesn't have to be common knowledge.
Yeah, it seemed like it would be a mistake for them to want to cause genocide to humans, though, like 10 years ago.
Yes. Well, I wonder actually how much of that as well, because I mean we were saying that's why they helped fund the Babylon stations, but it's not like they were funding Babylon stations prior to that war. Like maybe this is something they only like really discovered in their history and like saw in this footage, or maybe understood that this was like a co-venture with the humans or something like that. Since the war, right? Maybe when they went all guns blazing into this war with the human race, they didn't know, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe they're going to be, maybe the reasons why we're still here today probably wasn't something they knew about. So
yeah, it seems like, I don't know, it just seems like something Delenn would have known about when she was whipping Sinclair as he was being crucified. She wasn't doing the flagellation. But
So maybe the Grey Council did know before that. Maybe they hadn't quite sussed out that it was a human-related thing, and maybe that's partly what they learned when they learned that their souls were connected with the humans. Maybe the reason why humans are connected to Minbari in the first place is because a bunch of them. Well, it's not a bunch of them because the crew evacuated, but maybe Sinclair in the past, like, you know, got with a Minbari, so there's some human DNA sprinkled in with the gene pool, as it were.
Maybe
that Minbari gene pool is a little bit of Sinclair in there. So maybe that's partly why that humans and Minbari are so, because 1,000 years ago, that's a long time ago. That's a lot of descendants to potentially.
So you think that that Delenn might be possibly a distant relative of Sinclair?
Sinclair? I mean, maybe. I don't know. It's a bit tough to call with a 1,000-year gap, admittedly, and that's assuming he survives when he goes back to like help fight the shadows. Maybe he goes out in a blaze of glory saving them. I don't know.
Maybe.
Like, there's a lot of potential things there. So that's interesting. Point number one is that Babylon 4 goes back in time and helps fight off the shadows, and that's kind of what turns the tide. That's really cool, right? And it kind of fits in. It's a new bit of information, but it fits neatly onto what we already knew about Babylon 4. Cool stuff. The other thing here that I quite liked is that it's like, well, when we go back to Babylon 4 disappearing, right? So we know that someone like time snatched it, but who? And we see that the shadows had sent a device, like basically a bomb, right, to come and explode Babylon 4. And it's actually the White Star that intervenes. What sets up the plot of this episode and their mission is that it's now time for them to go through this new wormhole, effectively, that's been created, to go back and save Babylon 4 and attach the time warp device thing that'll take it into the past and so on, right? That's all cool, right? I mean, to begin with, it goes into the future, because we know it goes into the future of Babylon 5 Season 1, but then it's going to go back afterwards. All fine. What I like about this, though, before we start talking about the premise of this episode, is that this kind of makes it very clear that this entire time the Shadows have known that a Babylon station was what helped like defeat them, and that's why they probably destroyed Babylon's 1, 2, and 3 and were trying to destroy Babylon 4.
Planted somebody on Babylon 5 to begin with.
Yeah. So they clearly destroyed 1, 2, and 3. They tried to do it with 4, and maybe the reason why they didn't just immediately try to destroy 5 is because, wait a minute, who was this unknown force that showed up when we tried to do it at 4? And now 4's starting to jump through time. And hell, maybe they'd even figure, like, what's the point? If 4's the one that comes back and like fights us, then it's already jumped. We can't do anything about that now. So there's a few reasons.
Let's just start a new war.
I mean, do you really think that's when they decide to start a war? I mean, from the way Delenn describes it, it sounds like they immediately wanted to start a new war and they just had to, spend 1,000 years building
they had
their
to
ships.
recuperate, right?
Yeah. Well, because that's what they say is if they don't if they don't send Babylon 4 back in time to do this, then they might still win, but the Shadows will probably be like in a much better position and they'll probably attack like much earlier, and therefore Earth won't even be in space yet. We'll just be, it'll be like the 30s or something. 1930s.
I'm not sure 1930s. I'm not sure when they, if we have the information yet to know when they started, but I mean a lot of it seems to be kicked off when Sheridan's wife's ship and crew crashed on that planet on the Outer Rim, right?
I mean, that's when they started reaching out to other people, but that doesn't mean that they weren't preparing for centuries, like building ships and shit. Like, who knows what they were doing internally? That could have started the second they lost the first war. So I don't know. That doesn't really matter.
Maybe they're like cicadas. They just have to go away underground for like 7,000 years, or I guess every 1,000 years they come out, kind of like cicadas. Every 7 years or something they come out.
I mean, ultimately, I don't think it matters that much. Really. I mean, unless there's other timeline stuff that becomes important later. But at least for the purpose of this, like, the point is that it took this long. Like, it gave everyone else a time to advance in technology and for the humans to advance in technology, so that when the time came, we stood a chance. Like, we can maybe band together and fight. Because if this happened a couple of 100 years ago, before we were doing space travel and before we had spaceships that could fight, then we would be, like, we'd be praying for the Minbari to come and save us.
We'd have to go into the future 1,000 years and grab a ship from there.
Yes, if and you say that as if it's that easy. Like, this isn't exactly something they just do in the episode. Like the planet below is like making the wormhole.
Yeah, it's Drow and his helpers.
Yes,
who we've seen before.
Well, we've seen one of them before. Yeah,
we've seen one of them before, which I know people said in the comments, but like I didn't figure it out.
What do you mean?
Well, people were saying in the comments, with the episode where Drow this season showed up and was talking to like Ivana and stuff, and he mentioned that he had people who he could talk to on the planet, and I guess he mentioned the name of this guy in this episode
Zathras.
who we'd seen before. Zathras, yeah, who we've seen before in another episode, but I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, no, Zathras. As soon as he started talking, I recognized him immediately in this episode.
Yeah.
He's got a very distinct way of speaking.
Yeah, he's not a favorite of mine.
Don't like Zathras, no?
No, I didn't like him the first time either. I'm sure we talked about it.
Sure. But as soon as Sinclair sees him, he's like, he remembers back, and at the time he said, you're not the one, but kind of in a weird way that said, you are him, but you're not the one of him. You're not like... So Sinclair says, hey, when you see me in your future, do not tell me that you've seen me before. Don't say anything that will alter the future, or alter the past, or whatever you want to phrase it as. So yeah, there's a lot of like tying up of these like threads that were set up in that episode, which is kind of neat. But all this mythology stuff is great, and I haven't even got to one of the most juiciest things that I have, because a lot of this feels fairly closed off in the sense that, presuming they succeed next episode, because we end this episode, they've only just gotten to Babylon 4. They've taken care of the shadows who are coming to destroy it, but they haven't got to. They've only just like docked with Babylon 4 at the end of the episode to go and deal with the the time warp device, right, on the reactor. So assuming they succeed though, it kind of just neatly finishes things off with these plot beats, which is that, okay, it will go back in time, it will help win that first war like it always did, and we'll be in our current day place again, back to kind of like, not square one, but we will, I'm sure we'll all have grown. Obviously, the one big caveat here is what happens to Sheridan, but we'll get to that in a minute. But that all of that stuff will be neatly closed off, because it'll just kind of fulfill what they already set up, and Babylon 4 will be where it needs to be. We will have stopped the shadows from interfering with Babylon 4, all these things, nice and done. The one caveat to all this is that Sheridan gets lost in time. His device, Zathras has got these protective time devices that everyone wears, so they sort of stay anchored to the ship and to the time they're in. But Sheridan's gets destroyed when they destroy the shadow vessel, and
by like a heat-seeking shiny ball thing. I don't know what it is. It seemed to be targeting him though, almost like it was sentient.
I never really considered that, but maybe you're right. But he disappears, and they're all freaking out, and they're like sad about it and all that. And what's so neat, so I said at the start of the episode that we see Sinclair's name, and then we have a couple of seconds to process that we've seen his name, and then the hood comes off, so it kind of sets him up right before it reveals him. So there's kind of this rush before it happens. They do the same damn thing here towards the end of the episode, where they give you enough like visual clues of who we're about to see. Because I called it, and I don't think it's like I figured out like the Matrix or anything. I think it's meant to be quite gettable. But it's that thing where you see a few guards, you get a sense that he's somewhere kind of royal, and there's just that moment in your brain that might or might not go, we're about to see old man Londo. That's where he's went in time. And sure enough, we see Emperor Londo in the future, and
he is crusty looking.
This is the Londo that we've been seeing teased in these visions and these prophecies since season 1, and all of a sudden it's like, this isn't just like, this would be like a decent sized moment if it was like just we'd never seen this before, and it was just, okay, the premise of this is that Sheridan's went into the future. We're on Centauri Prime, and we're going to find out what's been happening to Londo. We're going to set up this dark future that's going to be related to the themes of the show. Cool. But because they've been like seeding like, like the point of where Londo ends up at the very end of his life is important, and we've seen some glimpses of that, it really felt like a big deal. Like when we saw Old Man Londo in this episode, it was like, oh shit, we're actually going to interact with Old Man Londo and hear about things and like hear what he's going through and what his current attitude and motivations are, and like maybe seed that back through what Sheridan's story is going to be once, because he's obviously going to get back to the main timeline. Of course he is. There's no way we're stranding Sheridan here for a long time.
No, he hasn't kissed Dylan yet.
And they were holding hands when things were getting rocky on the ship.
I know, and then they showed Sheridan giving a little smile in between.
Wrong name.
Sorry, Sinclair.
Yeah, Sheridan didn't make a lot of sense in the. I mean, obviously, of course, he might be smiling. Yeah, he's smiling. He's holding Dylan's hand. He's a happy man. But but yeah, Sinclair's like, yes, those two crazy kids.
But he's just happy for Dylan.
But this was exciting because unlike the other things, this isn't a closed thing. This is like, we don't know how. Okay, we technically know how Londo's death is going to happen because we've heard about him and Jakar strangling each other, but we don't have as much of a closed story with this, where how this is going to affect the story, the important part of it. We get a couple of hints here towards the end where he talks about how, you beat the shadows. Like this is a huge thing. We actually have someone in the future saying you win. Like you actually do defeat the shadows, but some of the remains of them like come to Centauri Prime, and like yes, like a lot of the galaxy's happy, but we have been desolated. And he looks out the window and we get their best attempt at the effects of the city like on fire and all the rest of it. And this was like, this is interesting stuff, because now we have a Sheridan who, when he comes back through time, is going to have to like try and change this without losing the war. And how does he, like, the moral complexity of him trying to win the war still, but do it in a way that will also help the Centauri, when the Centauri, and particularly Londo, are at the center of blame for a lot of what's going on. There's a lot of moral complexity there to that, but I think the idea of Sheridan trying to achieve that, even if he fails, but if he tries to actually also make sure that Londo doesn't get this horrible future, there's something really strong conceptually about that to me from a character perspective, and like wanting to root for him to do the right thing, and how he's going to try and do the right thing no matter what. Or maybe it's going to be a harsh lesson of you can't save everyone. Like, this is just the unfortunate side effect. And Londo made his bed. He made his bed for his people, and that's where it's going to go. Thoughts? I'm sorry, you look bored as I was.
Yeah, I tried to cut
thought
in like 4 times.
Well, I had to finish my thought. I had to finish the whole all the parts. There was a lot of parts to that. Okay, right? I've said all the parts.
Okay, fine.
And go.
What a great conversation this has been.
On you go. The floor is yours. The red carpet is out. Okay?
Yes, I definitely think this is Londo. Just he seems to have a lot of resentment towards Sheridan, presumably everybody that's not Centauri, and I'm sure that's because, well, yeah, no one cares about you because you invaded everybody, and you're the reason this war even happened. I mean, in a way, you're definitely a catalyst. So, yeah, this is very much he made this bed, he has to lie in it now, but he's still blaming everybody else. But also, the thought that crossed my mind is Veer like somewhere alive waiting to become emperor, or was he already emperor and now he's dead?
I thought that too, yeah.
Because that's a very old man Londo on the throne.
But Veer is younger, so he could still be waiting. He could still be an old man emperor afterwards.
Yeah, although I think really in reality, like, they're pretty close to the same age, like the actors are.
Oh, sure, that doesn't matter though. Like in the show, Londo's like middle-aged and Veer's like 25. Like that's what the show's telling us in terms of their ages.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that is the main thing that crossed my mind also. But yeah, Londo's been abandoned by the rest of the galaxy, but it's his fault.
And just think, because we've talked in the past, and we've kind of given this up a little bit as over the last like half season because of just how much Londo's done and where we've gone with the story. But if you think back to season 1, when we talked about how the battle for Londo's soul and him to make the right choice and like make having him learn the right lesson might be the heart of the show that succeeds. There is something like they keep showing us how bad things are going to get for Londo and his people. And a lot of it's because of the association that he made with the shadows and a lot of the choices that he's made over the course of the show. So think about the potential uplift that it could have if they pull this off, where if that's the key thing that Sheridan is able to change, that he makes Londo change his mind on something. And even if it's as simple as once everything's going down, that the Centauri kind of like pitch in, or whatever it may be, but the idea being that Centauri Prime isn't ostracized from everyone else because it ultimately by the end they kind of try to help or they try to do whatever, so they don't get alienated in the same way that they seem to do in this future. Like that could be a great
maybe. I do
redemption.
think that I'm not holding on to redemption anymore. Not since the last episode where he went back to Morden.
Don't get me wrong. It's hard to believe in it right now, but that's kind of why it would be so like fulfilling if it does happen.
All right, but how many passes are we going to give him? Like he'd have to do something pretty amazing.
Well, it's not about giving him passes, and it's not about him evening the score. It's not like he's going to redeem himself for everything he's done, but it's the idea that if he makes one good choice before the end, like it's the fact that he's on the right path and he's learned something is the important part. It's not about keeping score and think, oh, he's done it. He's even, he's broke even again.
Sure.
He's back to net zero of being a dick. Like it's not going to. It doesn't work like that. And I think that's part of the point, though, is that like if someone is awful, if someone, if you remember that episode with Brad Dourif where he was this killer, he'd killed a bunch of people, and it was like, okay, now that he's good and he doesn't remember that, and he's trying to do all these good things with good people, and he keeps doing more good things, like. The point of that isn't so much to officially to not have someone to keep score, so there's a time when you've definitely like done enough good to make up for the bad things you've done. The point is that once you've realized that you have to be good and you commit yourself to doing that you just are on that path, and maybe you'll never literally on a pure mathematics level even that out, but that's not the important part. The important part is just that you're doing the right thing for the rest of your time, or you're trying to do the right thing, or whatever, however you want to look at it or phrase it. I think
no Faustus, curse thyself.
I think it's a failing of the internet sometimes that people look at things in so black and white. Maybe it's just a failing of people in general, to be honest, but I see it a lot when talking about movies and TV and stuff like that, where there's like no empathy for for a character who sort of does one good thing before the end, and it's sort of like they finally learn something. It's like, yeah, but he still did all these bad things, so screw him, he deserved to die, or there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like, well, yeah, but the point is that that you finally got it. Sure,
like I understand we all love a rehabilitation story or a redemption story, but like I mean, the last moment he had with Morden seemed like, okay, I don't know that Londo's coming back from this. Sure, he might have a realization before he dies, or whether of, I don't know, of something where he's just like, I've made a huge mistake. I'm sorry, I'm sorry to the Narn people, and here's my riches to your planet now. But like, what else? What could he do? Like, you have to do something to save everybody to be redeemed at this point.
Again, it's not about matching it. It's not about.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Like, it's just you just want the character to admit that he's flawed before the end. But
let me be clear though. I'm not saying I think this is still going to happen. I'm not saying it's even likely to happen. I'm simply saying that the pieces are on the board for the potential for it to be extremely amazing if it's actually achieved at this. Given how much he has done and given how far he's went, if it actually happens and it feels like it's earned, it will be an amazing achievement. That's kind of the point I'm making. I'm not saying I expect it still. I agree that it's least likely now. It's never been less likely, really, in the course of this show than it has been since that episode with Martin. Like, I agree with that. but I'm not saying that I'm expecting it more now. I'm simply saying that having Sheridan see him in this future and seeing like a new sort of better I mean, he's better in present day, don't get me wrong, but like this better version of Londo who has a legitimate reason to be better and feel like his people have been shifted aside in this post Shadow War world. Like the idea that at least Sheridan now has a reason to try and do the right thing, and maybe part of the beauty of the story will be that Sheridan will try and do the right thing, and he will fail to win over Londo. He will fail to convince him of anything, but he'll still try and do the right thing anyway, because it's not about just winning over Londo. It's about doing the right thing for a large group of people, an entire race of people in this case. And being able to swallow his pride and not and just put up with Londo being a dick, but still try to save as many Centauri as he can because it's the right thing to do, could be also the point. That could be more the direction it goes in, as opposed to we make Londo realize something. But if Londo's the one in charge, then you can kind of see how it would become Londo has to at least be willing to play ball on some level. But the can of worms that this opened, this future visit with Old Man Londo, and I am so excited to see what else is shared between them in the future, because we're going to spend some more time there next episode. I'm so excited to see how Sheridan takes this information, what he's like with Londo when he comes back. I can't even begin to predict that, because I don't know what else he's going to reveal to him in this future yet, but...
Sure, I mean, we really don't have very much interaction of Londo and Sheridan anyway. These past season and a half, it's been... I mean, from the beginning... Londo was lying to him, and so Sheridan's well, I don't like that guy, and then he started a war, so there hasn't been a lot of positive it's been very adversarial, I'd say, their relationship from the beginning.
So Sinclair was much friendlier with Londo. It's kind of an interesting idea as well, how much worse of a path is Londo on, because he has someone in in command on Babylon 5 that is actively not against him, that doesn't sound right, but who he got off on the wrong foot with Sheridan immediately, and Sheridan never saw him anything other than some sort of conniving.
They've never partied together.
Yeah, whereas Sinclair, I feel tried to reach out to Londo a lot, tried to find some sort of common ground with them. I do wonder this, and I think this will alter this quite a bit. I think Sheridan, maybe he'll just see Londo as an outright villain after this, but part of me does kind of think he's going to be sympathetic as to what the future holds for Centauri.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
For which one?
If that happens, if he becomes sympathetic.
Yeah, and not so much sympathetic to anything Londo's currently doing or what he's been like, but more just... No, we have to reach out to them too. It has to be about saving everyone, or otherwise we're no better than the shadows. It has to be about everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of potential. So much potential in all of these story threads that are brought up. There's a lot of good mythology in this that's just... all of it. All of it's great.
Good show.
I feel way more enthusiastic about this episode than you are.
I'm sleepy. I went to a wedding yesterday. I'm still recovering.
I love this episode. Okay, it felt important.
It's great.
Within
I
the
did
first
think
minute.
there's a lot of. Is it green screen when everybody has a blue outline around their silhouettes?
Well, maybe it may be blue screen rather than green screen.
Then.
But
yeah, a lot of green screen this episode.
It's because of the ship windows. They're constantly in the cockpit of the White Star.
Ongoing on Mimbar, and there's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there is.
It looked nice. Nice for the time. I enjoyed that part. I don't know. I like the way it looks.
You like? Okay.
Even though it doesn't look real, I like the way it looks.
Okay.
There's probably some nostalgia kicking in, that's all.
Okay. That won't work for necessarily younger people, but yes, for people who are at least of a certain age, you'll find a charm in how these effects look. Yes.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I like obviously some other things that we kind of glossed over a little bit. We mentioned Zach. We mentioned the scene where Garibaldi comes back, and because Sheridan is asked by Sinclair to not tell Garibaldi, because Garibaldi's out there at Sector 14. He could just wait out there and like join up with them, and he's like, "No, you go back to base." But he also says, "Don't tell Garibaldi that I'm here, because he'll just want to come with us." And that's kind of what he says in the video when Garibaldi unlocks it. But I did like the scene where poor Zach, because this is not his fault. He's not being a dick, but he does kind of ruin the
he's just really excited.
Yeah, he's like, "Hey, did you see Sinclair's back? Ambassador Sinclair's kicking about." And Garibaldi's like, "Wait, what? He's here? He didn't come to see me? What is this?"
Oh no, he left already.
He looks heartbroken. It's a
he
shame
really
for
does.
him.
Oh, actually, I think his acting's really good in it. He looks very betrayed about the whole thing, and which is why I don't think he's gonna stay on the station next episode. I don't know how he can do it, but I think he's gonna at least try.
Yeah, well, the other interesting thing is I think they confirmed that these visions of the future of Ivanova with these distress calls, they said it was 8 days, I think, in the future. They actually pinpointed it as 8 days. So I wonder if that's something we get to in part 2. But given that I feel like we're still just dealing with the Babylon 4 mission in part 2, I would suspect it might actually be a later episode. If there is still an event, I mean, maybe this will cancel out whatever's going to happen next episode.
Yeah, maybe.
But it kind of feels like it's going to be maybe not the finale, but it could be. Depending on how condensed in time the next batch of episodes are, it could be. But given that we have at least one dud in there, it doesn't feel like it's going to be.
Oh, the Stalag 17 episode. What is it called?
Grey 17 is missing.
Grey 17.
I think that's what's called. Something like that.
Stalag 17 is a great movie, but probably not the same thing.
Yes. I mean, I was like, do you know something about the plot? Do you think it's got a similar plot?
Well, Grey 17 is missing. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know anything about the
plot. Yeah. I thought that's why we were making a comparison to it. There's just a number.
There's just the 17.
Yeah. So no, I enjoyed those scenes. All the mythology stuff, all of it. I think what's so exciting about it is that everything that they introduced in this episode wasn't a completely fresh thing. All of it was built upon stuff we'd already had teased, and all of a sudden these vague, visions of a future. We've had Londo have that specific vision of all the shadow ships coming into Centauri Prime, and all of a sudden it's wait, that happens because they lose and they kind of retreat to Centauri Prime as kind of like a base, just to and they sort of well, we lost, so we're just going to take over your planet and hide here, or do it out of revenge because you were supposed to help us and you didn't, you little shits, or something to that effect.
We own you guys.
Yeah. That adds a different tinge to that. The idea of Londo seeing this is this isn't just it's not just that the shadows turn on them, it's that the rest of good civilization, to give it a name, the rest of the light win. But Centauri Prime is kind of just thrown under the bus.
It's a trash planet now.
Yeah. And now effectively they get to feel what the Narn felt when Centauri took over their planet, because the shadows sort of do something similar to them. Potentially. We don't know enough to say that for sure, but I'm saying that that's a potential kind of parallel that might happen. So, fantastic episode. This was great.
Very good. Very fun.
This was great. This was
lots of cool stuff. Lots of action. Lots of good pacing. Lots of story. That's not new to this.
Absolutely. If there's a single nitpick, really, it's just that I almost felt like it would have been. Admittedly, it wouldn't have worked out time wise. You'd have to have had part 2 be a little bit longer, or rearrange some things. But actually it would be easy to rearrange, because I think the cliffhanger is a bit weird, because it's just they've docked with Babylon 4, they get into a crawl space and okay, let's go do this because it's going to be really hard, and it just kind of goes to be continued. I felt like there was no reason not to just hold the future bit with Sheridan waking up and seeing Londo. That scene could have just been put to the end.
That would have been great, yeah.
And that would have been a better thing to end with a to be continued on, is just him looking out at the Centauri Prime and devastation. So I'm not sure structurally why they made that choice, because all you would have to do is push that to the end and it wouldn't affect anything otherwise. I don't think
it really wouldn't.
Yeah, because there's nothing that happens in any of the scenes that happen after that needed to be first. Like, that could just be at the end. So. Yeah. So that's weird. But minor nitpick. I am jazzed for part 2. Super excited.
Yeah. Next week.
There was only... I don't remember what moment it was, but there was a moment where Cole was looking at someone kind of weird from behind, and I thought, what's going on here?
I mean, the way he looked at Sinclair, because Sinclair's the leader of the Rangers, right? He kind of did like a little Ranger prayer to him at one point. I don't like Cole.
I think you've hinted at that.
Now he's
times.
the Jared Leto of the of the show. He's Morbius.
I'll take him over Jared Leto though. If I'm picking between the two, I'll take Marcus Cole any day over Jared Leto.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Especially,
I don't know. I do think Jared Leto's a good actor. He's just, he's got a bit of a stigma around him.
To be fair, he gave himself that stigma.
That's true.
That was his own doing. Let's not pretend otherwise.
But obviously, like, he is a very talented actor in the right role.
You know what? Sending dead rats and used condoms to your co-workers just gets you a reputation. Now, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's a line.
Yeah, there's a little try hard also.
Oh, jeez. How did you feel, actually, just before we wrap up, how did you feel about seeing Sheridan and Sinclair together, their interactions?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? It's like Star Trek Generations in the show. It's I thought they were fine. Like, they are two very different leaders. Like, they have very different personalities, and actually it made me kind of grateful that Sheridan's on the show, because I do think he's just a lot more fun to watch. Like, sure. I definitely don't hate Sinclair, but like it was a big change when, Bruce Boxleitner showed up and he's all smiling and he's kind of boisterous and excited, and when he's angry you could tell, whereas Sinclair is just like one level all the time.
It's kind of funny to me that, Sheridan did take a little bit to grow into his character, but once he did, he felt more enriched because there was kind of like a building to him, because he has layers, like you say. There's multiple facets to him, and like, because he is so smiley most of the time, when he does get angry or he does look concerned, it hits a lot harder.
Yeah,
and it's kind of just funny to me thinking about, like, they were kind of forced into this, like, having a new character come in, and how obviously no, like, ill will, no one's happy about what the actor was going through, that the reasons why he had to leave.
No, I mean, and when we watched season 1, I definitely liked Sinclair.
Yeah,
and was sad to see him go. But
it's kind of interesting that being forced into, like, introduce another character, and maybe a lot of the developments that happened with Sheridan would have happened with Sinclair anyway. Like, a lot of
but I mean, Bruce is pretty charismatic. Like, he's just fun to watch.
Sure, but I just mean from a writing perspective, like, maybe a lot of the ideas that we have seen happen with Sheridan would have happened to Sinclair, so Sinclair would have gotten more layered as it went on as well anyway. But
do you think he would have fallen in love with Delenn after her transformation?
I think so. I think it, like,
they were kind of having like a thing too, but it seemed more professional, or like, I don't know, more like mentor-esque maybe. But it could have led into something. I
don't feel the need to define it too much. I would just say that they had held back enough that it doesn't feel like she has a second love interest, because now she's like flirting with Sheridan. She just does this to
all the captains, yeah.
But at the same time, though, if Sinclair stuck around and Sheridan never came on the show, I think whatever chemistry they had in season 1, I think you could have easily had it turn into what Sheridan and Delenn had in season 2 with Sinclair, and I think it would have felt natural. I think it would have felt like a continuation of what sort of natural kind of camaraderie they already had in season 1. I think it would have played off nicely, like, growing into a love interest thing. But luckily though, it didn't get so far in season 1 that it felt like she was shifting to a new love interest in season 2. Looking back on it now, I think they're almost just kind of lucky again that they never went far enough with it in season 1.
Well, also Sinclair already had like love interests on the show. He had 2 girlfriends,
That's
right?
true.
Between the Gathering and then the other woman who went to the planet.
But they would have done it. Like I would bet you everything that they.
But like
they,
there was, it didn't seem like their chemistry was romantic in any way. It still was very much like, oh, they're just like they just talk pretty over there on Minbar, and they like to have these long speeches, which could have led into something. But also Sheridan showing up on the station, not having any other love interest, seeing her transformation right away and going like, whoa, she's like kind of hot. I think like from the beginning, it was just, there was something there. There's this, a spark right away.
Sure. No, I agree. Like it's a lot of this is for the better. I'm just talking about whatever the original plans were. I do think that they probably would have transitioned into it being a romantic thing. It's not like any of the love interests that Sinclair had. Like I felt like long timers, or like they were going to be here for big stories or anything. I totally think they would have made that shift. So it was kind of nice in this episode. They had that moment where Sinclair kind of sees them holding hands and kind of smiles. It was like I mean, not that he was a previous love interest.
That could have been mine.
But it was like a nice passing of the torch, and that's something that Sinclair and Sheridan never got to have, really. So seeing them interact, that's probably the most exciting thing. And you compare it to Star Trek Generations. Yeah, it's a much better version of Star Trek Generations.
Disagree.
So that movie's not good. Come on.
It's great.
So
10 out of 10.
You and your weird Trek rose tinted glasses.
I honestly, I don't know why that movie's so hated. Like, I get, what happens to Captain Kirk. I won't spoil it, but like people don't like that. Like, fine, but I still really like the film a lot. Anyway, yeah, I do. Like, they're both, seeing the 2 of them together, I thought was fun for fans, obviously, but they didn't really seem to have a lot of chemistry together. But they're just very different personality types, and I think that's why. They were both fine. I mean,
the upside to that is apparently Tara's beauty is too much for the camera to handle, so it's just out of focus so that it doesn't crash and burn, apparently. Oh, there it is. Now it's
strange.
Focus.
Okay, yeah, because it seemed to be fine on my end. It's just on the Skype for some reason. But yeah, I know I look good today. It's just leftover wedding hair.
Yeah,
it wasn't my wedding.
So, what was I saying?
I don't know. I have that effect on men.
Yeah, no, I mean, the bright side to this, if you do think they don't have much chemistry together, is that obviously Sinclair's not sticking around. I mean, Sinclair, could technically die next episode, or well, at the very least will be in the future or on his path of time travel, and we won't see more beyond that. But seeing them together for a little bit is interesting. It does give you this passing of the torch moment, and I think it was almost a little bit of a nice thing where Sheridan gets beamed away on this time travel adventure, which is super fun and exciting from his perspective because we get all this Londo stuff. It feels super important for the rest of the show and the themes between those characters, but it did naturally do this thing where all of a sudden Sinclair's in charge again. So it leaves him on the ship.
He gets to play captain again.
With Ivanova and Delenn and Lanier, and all of a sudden he's the one who's saying, look, Sheridan knew why we were out here, we have to try and do this, and maybe this is the only way to save him, is to go through with this mission. So I thought that was interesting that we have them together for a bit, and he lets Sheridan
He was really quick to be like, we could worry about Sheridan some other time. We have to go take care of this. I'm in charge now.
Sure, but he did let Sheridan. He was the captain. Sheridan was in command the entire time. He was making the calls, okaying the missions, all that stuff. It wasn't until he got beamed away where Sinclair sort of came out. Okay, we have to do this, and kind of took the leadership role again. But it does kind of feel like, for Sinclair's send-off on a meta level, I mean, from an outside force level, we want Sinclair to feel like he's in charge for his final episode, for his send-off, and I think that's partly why. I mean, I'm not saying it's the only reason why. I'm sure there's a lot of great cool things coming from the Sheridan stuff as well, but this is one of the neat things about these two things happening together, is that Sinclair gets to feel like he's captain again, or commander again, for one episode, whilst we see we say goodbye, and we get to say goodbye to the actor properly, and whatever. So that's cool.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, fun stuff. Yeah, I guess we'll wrap up there. Well, I'm sure we'll talk more about the mythology stuff in season 2 and part 2, because part 2
we'll have more answers.
We'll have more stuff from the future, and we can speculate a bit more on that.
I think I'll rewatch the Babylon Square episode also. Sure.
You may notice some inconsistencies though. Maybe it'll annoy you.
Maybe.
It's like sometimes I'll critique because they do a couple of flashbacks in this to like things that happened in that episode, but it has been such a long time since that episode that I did kind of appreciate the refreshers when they popped up, so I shall not complain.
Yeah, I mean, season 1 was a while ago. Especially
if you're watching it as it aired and you had the gaps between seasons. Even though we went straight on to season 2 and then straight on to season 3, it still felt like it was enough time ago that I kind of needed a little, like I recognized, what's his face, Zathras, but seeing the clip again just like made it solidified. It was like, okay, I know exactly who this is. I know exactly what the context was at the time. So yeah, it was a smart choice. I think they made the right call.
Agreed.
All right, so let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below, and we will see if their mission in Babylon 4 is successful. I presume it is. I'll see what we also learn about the future, and we'll see all these other things going on, and what Garibaldi, he's probably going to do something stupid. I actually, it raised me the final line that I quite liked is Sinclair says, are you ready? And Delenn says, why do humans always say that right before we do something really stupid or really silly? It's like, tradition. Which actually, the other line I liked was someone says something about how the weapons work. That's the shields. It's like because of the Vorlon tech on the ship, it adapts and learns. So because they've already fought a shadow ship before, it can actually withstand the blast better. It's like, okay, that's kind of neat. And it gives us a reason why we can like stand up in a fight better than we could before. But Sheridan turns around and goes, as my great grandfather used to say, cool. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, people don't say cool in this show, and that would be an old phrase.
I'm sad that cool is going to go away. I say it all the time.
That's a neat touch. Which actually, just the final point, but we have to mention it. We saw another Vorlon.
Oh yeah. He's got a square face.
Yeah, we got another Vorlon, different helmet to Kosh, but we had another Vorlon.
I was excited to see that, yeah.
I suspect part of this might be because they used part of the suit again, so they were able to design a new helmet and put it on the old robe. So that
I think it's the same voice actor, too.
Oh, he sounded different to me.
He did sound different, but I think it's the same guy.
Oh, sure, yeah. Maybe it is, but... so yeah, there's a Vorlon on Mimbar, so that was cool to see. It was just like, oh man, we just killed Kosh.
I mean, we had talked about it before. Like, have we seen other Vorlons? Like, do we know for sure they exist, or is it just Kosh?
Yeah, because we've heard so much about how their ships were part life that maybe it was just the fleet of ships in Kosh. Obviously, the episode he died kind of suggested otherwise, in the sense that they said his ship was connected to him, so that implies that all the other ships are connected to their Vorlons. But yeah, that was something that we speculated like a season ago about, because we just only ever saw him. But no, there's a Vorlon. There he is. Yeah. So neat.
There's at least 2, so probably more.
Well, there's at least 1, because the other one we had is dead now.
There was at least 2.
There was at least 2. Yes. So cool. All right, there you go. So did you already plug things? Did you already do Patreon?
No.
We didn't? Okay. So it's because we did Twilight Zone before this, so I'm remembering that. Yeah, so let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. And of course, ding the bell for notifications if you care so. All that stuff does help on YouTube. That's why every YouTuber tells you to do it. So please hit the buttons, and I'll be nice and not interrupt, or like I'll give you the easily done. Tara, tell everyone about the Patreon.
Yes, thank you, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you'll get bonus materials for other shows we do. And if you donate $5 per month, you will get access to these Babylon 5 reviews 6 days early. So if you're not on Patreon yet and you want to know what we think of part 2, you can go on there and find out tomorrow.
Woohoo.
Thank you.
Do you know, that's just completely off topic, but someone mentioned it was Emma Stone's birthday, so what's your favourite Emma Stone movie on Twitter? And I said, well, it's not a movie, but my favourite performance by her is the limited series she did called Maniac. But honestly, when I was looking at her IMDb, I kind of realised that I don't really like a lot of movies that she's in, because I'm not a musical guy, and I think Zombieland's overrated, so I don't really like that much. And
Birdman?
But yeah, Birdman's good, but she's got a fairly minor role in that. But that's a good movie. No, I agree, that's a good movie. But
Superbad?
But I said this. It's okay. I'm not a big Superbad guy.
Yeah, it's okay. I'd say so.
Yeah, but I said this on Twitter that I don't really like. There's not a lot of Emma Stone movies that I actually really like or really love. And Tim sarcastically has responded, "Amazing Spider-Man, hello."
Mm-hmm.
And I can hear Tim's voice, and I think that's really funny. So I thought I'd share that with everyone.
He would say cool, also.
Yes, Tim would say cool. Yes, one day his great grandchild is going to say it like my great grandfather Tim the Goat Man said. Cool.
Yeah. He has continued his lineage.
Mm-hmm. He has,
Got
yes.
a baby.
The prospect is there. If his son grows up to spread his seed and so on and so forth, then we'll have a descendant of Tim on Male Fuzz 3000.
Ooh, I like that name.
Is that got anything to do with a certain Mystery Science Theater? That's also.
I assume that's why you picked the number 3000.
I just picked 3000 because it was the next millennia, but yeah, it's the next one. But yeah, okay. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Babylon 5, and just remember to don't give away the salsa.